Have you ever felt afraid to speak in front of people? Maybe your hands shake, your voice trembles, your mind goes blank. You are not alone. One of the greatest public speakers in history once felt exactly like you. His name was Demosthenes, but before he became famous in ancient Greece, before his words echoed in Grand Hall, he was just a quiet boy. A boy who stammered, a boy who was laughed at, a boy who was afraid to speak. This is his story, and maybe it can be yours too. In a corner of Athens, young Demosthenes watched other boys run and play. They shouted loudly, confidently, but Demosthenes didn't shout. He couldn't. When he tried to speak, the words got stuck. His tongue felt heavy. His breath ran out too soon, and people laughed. He had a speech impediment. Some say he stammered. Some say he had trouble pronouncing certain letters. Whatever it was, it made him silent in a world that loved strong voices. He didn't just feel embarrassed. He felt invisible. And to make things worse, Demosthenes lost his father when he was very young. He was just 7. His father had been a wealthy man, a sword maker. But after his death, Demosthenes' guardians took over the estate and stole most of it. By the time he grew older, there was hardly anything left for him. No father, no support, no money, just silence. Many would have accepted their fate. Many would have stayed silent forever. But not Demosthenes. He may have been quiet, but inside him a storm was brewing. A desire, a fire, a need to be heard. He watched lawyers argue in the Athenian courts. He saw how words moved people, how speeches could change minds, win justice, shape history. And he decided, one day I will speak like that. But how does a boy with broken speech become a powerful speaker? That is where the journey begins. Not with talent, but with a decision. A decision to change, to grow, to fight for a voice. Demosthenes had made his decision. He would learn to speak. Not just speak, but speak powerfully. But the road was not easy. There were no speech coaches, no microphones, no online videos. All he had was himself and a mirror and a deep desire to change. Demosthenes built himself a study chamber underground, a small space hidden from the world. Why? So he could train without distraction. So he wouldn't care if someone laughed. So he could fight in silence. This room became his temple of transformation. He stood in front of the mirror and practiced speaking again and again. He didn't just talk, he trained. Like a warrior, but with words. He noticed how his lips moved. He corrected every stutter, every misstep, and then he did something unbelievable. He put pebbles in his mouth and spoke. Why? Because if he could speak clearly with pebbles, he could speak even better without them. But that wasn't enough. Demosthenes would go to the seashore, stand in front of the roaring waves and speak against the sound of the sea. He trained his voice to be louder, clearer, stronger. Wave after wave tried to drown his words, but he spoke louder and louder until the sea could no longer silence him. Every single day he trained. Every single day he stumbled, but stood again. He even shaved half his head just to stop himself from going outside, so he would be forced to stay and practice. That is how much he wanted to improve. He turned fear into discipline, shame into power. He studied the great speakers of Athens. He read their speeches. He listened carefully in the courts. He learned how to build arguments, how to use silence, how to pause, how to make people feel his words. Every day, his voice became clearer. Every month, his courage grew stronger. And over time, the boy who once couldn't speak became a young man with a voice like thunder. He started giving speeches. People listened. They were surprised. This was the same boy who once stammered? The same boy who was afraid to speak? Yes, because that boy chose to rise. And soon he would take his voice to the biggest stage of all, the courts of Athens. Demosthenes had trained in silence. He had spoken to the sea. He had faced his mirror and his fears. Now it was time to face people, real people, judges, lawyers, citizens, the Athenian courtroom. In Athens, the courtroom wasn't just a place for justice, it was the heart of democracy. Here, words were weapons. A man's fate could be sealed by a single speech. This was where Demosthenes would make his stand. Why? Because his guardians, those who stole his inheritance, still lived freely. He wanted justice. He wanted to prove that the quiet boy had a voice now, a voice that could fight back. He prepared for months. He didn't just learn the law, he learned how to make the law live in words. He wrote every sentence carefully. He made his arguments clear and powerful. And then he stood up, in front of the crowd, in front of the very people who once ignored him. He spoke. His voice trembled at first, but then it grew strong. Passionate, commanding, and by the end of his speech, Athens was silent. Demosthenes had done the impossible. He had won his case. But more than that, he had won something even greater: respect. People began to notice him. The boy who once couldn't speak had now become a speaker. But Demosthenes didn't stop there. He knew that if he could help himself, he could help others. So he became a public speaker, a man who used his words for justice, for truth, for the people. And as Athens faced danger from foreign powers, Demosthenes stepped up again. He gave speeches that shook the city. He warned his people of rising threats. He called for unity, for strength, for courage. His words were no longer just sounds. They were swords, they were shields, they were the voice of a free people. All this from a child who once hid in corners, from a boy who choked on his own voice, from someone who was afraid to speak. Demosthenes was no longer just a speaker. He had become a symbol, a voice of strength, a leader with words that moved hearts. His speeches were not just clever, they were full of fire. He spoke with passion. He believed every word. And that belief made others believe too. The people of Athens began to gather whenever Demosthenes was to speak. His voice filled the open-air assemblies. People leaned in to listen. He didn't shout just to be heard, he spoke with purpose. He spoke about freedom, about honor, about standing up for what is right. His words gave courage to the weak and fear to the corrupt. But not everyone liked him. Powerful people were afraid of his influence. They tried to silence him. They mocked his past, reminded everyone that he was once a stuttering boy. But Demosthenes didn't care. He had faced the waves. He had faced his own fear. No insult could shake him now. He stayed focused on what mattered, speaking for the people. When Athens was threatened by a rising power, the Philip of Macedon, Demosthenes was the first to raise his voice. He warned the people, gave speech after speech, pushed them to unite, to prepare, to protect their land. These speeches are now known as the Philippics. They became some of the most famous speeches in history because they weren't just about politics, they were about standing tall in the face of fear, just like Demosthenes had done all his life. He didn't always win. Sometimes the people didn't listen. Sometimes he lost. But that never stopped him, because to him, speaking out was the victory. Even in his later years, Demosthenes continued to speak for justice. Even when he was exiled, even when he was alone, he never stopped believing in the power of words because he had once been silent and he knew how precious a voice could be. Now, dear listener, let's talk about you. Do you feel nervous before speaking? Does your voice shake? Do you avoid speaking in front of others because you fear being judged? Then remember this. So did Demosthenes. He didn't start strong. He didn't even start clearly. He started afraid. Just like you. Just like millions of others. But he didn't let that fear win. He chose to fight it. And so can you. Start where you are. Even if your voice trembles, speak. Even if your hands shake, stand tall. Even if your words stumble, keep going. Practice like Demosthenes. Talk to your reflection. Record yourself. Speak out loud in a room. Read great speeches. Train your voice against noise, not to impress, but to express. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to begin. Public speaking is not a talent, it's a skill. And like any skill, it can be learned, it can be trained, it can be mastered. Demosthenes didn't have modern tools. He had stones, waves, mirrors, and willpower. You have even more than he did. The world needs your voice. There is someone out there who needs to hear your story, your message, your passion. Don't let fear steal your voice. Because if Demosthenes, a boy who stammered, a boy who was laughed at, a boy who could barely speak, could become one of the greatest orators of all time, then so can you. You are not too late. You are not too shy. You are not too broken. You are just beginning. Speak, even if your voice shakes. Speak, even if no one listens at first. Speak. Because every time you do, you grow. And maybe, just maybe, one day someone will say, "I was afraid to speak until I heard you." Let the story of Demosthenes remind you. The ones who are afraid are often the ones who will rise the highest if they just dare to begin. So go on. Speak, practice, fail, try again, grow. And one day, you will look back and smile. Because the voice you feared to use became the voice someone else needed to hear. You are not voiceless. You are not weak. You are becoming. Like Demosthenes, you were made to speak. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe the channel and like this video.